Now that we have the basics covered, we're gonna see how we can use other features of the dashboard to recognize shorter term trend changes. These features are P1 change and last P1, or at least their data points. P1 change and last P1, and also P2 change and last P2. It's the same thing. No need for theory this time. We're just gonna head over to the dashboard. We can see that P1 change and last P1 are in the table. We've ignored them until now. And again, I'm gonna just talk about P1 change and last P1, but know that it's the same thing for P2 change and last P2. Let's cover last P1 first. Last P1 simply means how many days ago it was since this hour of that row, in this case hour 0 where we're looking at, how many days ago it was since this put in P1. This shows that 6 days ago was the last time hour 0 put in P1. 2 days ago was the last time hour 1 put in a P1. 38 days ago was the last time hour 2 put in a P1. And so on and so on. So it just shows you how long ago it was that the last time P1 got put in for that hour. So if we look at, we see here 2 days ago, well, we can see that yesterday was apparently hour 4 and 2 days ago was hour 1. So let's check that. This is today. That means that this was yesterday. This was trading day yesterday. And we can see indeed here, hour 4 says it at the bottom, 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, P1. The day before that, it said 1. And there you go, 1 a.m. was the last P1. And it said 6 days ago was the last hour 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, oops, 5, 6. And there it is. Hour 0 as P1. And you might say, well, that's a long time ago, 6 days for hour 0, because it happens quite a bit. And yes, it is a long time ago. And it has, before this, it didn't even happen for 21 days or something. And this is where the other column comes in, P1 change. So we know that this column here, P1% and also P2%, are calculated on this date range. So right now I have over 2 years of data selected, almost 3, say 2.5, from 2021 till now 2024. So we know that this is, a big amount of data. That is, we need a big amount of data because that helps you make, it gives you more, how do you say it, statistically significant conclusions or statistically significant information. The more data you have, the more reliable it is. But the thing is, the more data you have, the less you see trend changes. So that is what P1 change is for. It is so we can anticipate on if things are changing in the short term. P1 change shows how much a certain hour in this case has changed compared to the selected, compared to the entire data. And this means that lately it has been hour 0 has been putting in 10.8% less times a P1. So recently P1 has only been put in at hour 0 for more or less 27% of the time, right? 27.9 minus 10.8. How this is calculated is with this, recent days. So right now for this column, we are looking at the last 50 days of price action, and we're calculating how often P1 is put in for that hour in the last 50 days instead of this. And then we just see what the difference is. So if you see a negative here, it means that it has been happening less. If you see a positive here, it means that it has been happening more. And then you can see that indeed, we have negative 10.8% for that hour 0. Is what we were just discussing, that it's happening a lot less. Now you can change it. You could also set it to 100 days. I usually have it to 50 or 100. So if you do 100 days, you can see that this changes. And in the last 100 days, it was 6.8% less. So it's just personal preference. I usually have it in between 50 and 100. Obviously, if you have 50 days, you're looking at the very recent data, and 100 days, just a little bit, well, still recent, but less data. So this is going to be more 50. The lower you have it, the more sensitive it's going to be to short-term changes. But you also have to realize that the lower you have it, the more you are thinning out your data and the more room there is for noise, so to say. It's going to be less reliable, so you want to be careful with thinning it out too much. Now, another way of looking at this is here. So I already had it selected. So we were previously looking at it to this chart, so the distribution of this table at P1, P2. For the totals, what you can also do is you can set it to recent. I usually have it to recent because now I can see what the distribution is over the recent days. So this will change. If I do 100, you will see this changes because it's looking at the amount of days I have selected here. So you can see that also here. So hour 1 has been happening 14.3% more in the last 50 days. So hour 1 has been very popular. As we can see that also hour 14 has been very popular, and that we see this in, I mean, of course you see this in the charts. We have been noticing this even without statistics. But so in the year, you can now see what has been happening in the recent data. And I choose to keep this on recent data myself. Of course, it's your preference, because I already see the totals here. Like, this is not giving me any new information. It's just showing it to me in a different way. This is showing it to me in a different way. Now, there's one more way we can interpret how trends are changing. And I want to, again, say, I use this to see if there are significant changes in short-term trends, and there really are at times. But if I, for example, press this, so I can press any row here, and what is going to happen is that this chart's going to calculate, and for this page it takes a little bit, and we can see how it develops. So this is how the moving average of how often P1 and P2, but P2 here is 0 because it's hour 0. P2 doesn't happen a lot on that hour, but we can see the moving average of how often P1 is being put in for the selected hour, in this case hour 0, right? P1 and P2% moving average for selected hour. You can select the moving average number of days, so in this case I have 35 selected. It's the same as with a moving average on your trading view chart. The higher you put it, the more long-term you're looking, right? So the less sensitive it is to recent data. So if I, for example, put it at 50, it will recalculate it. And this chart takes a little bit to calculate because it has quite some data to go through. But now you see it becomes a lot smoother. And this is just a nice way of looking at it. I personally really like, for example, I think it's really interesting. You see this a lot where you can see that 40% is kind of acting as resistance and 20% as support. So for example, now I see that it has not been happening a lot, but there seems to be a trend where every time you reach this 20%, so we have not had hour 0 as a P1 for quite a while. It has not been happening a lot. Then usually you see a bounce back, which means that you could expect a period where you do have a lot more P1s being put in at hour 0. So this is also how I look at the changes in trend, and you can also select a different time frame. So this looks at the time frame you have selected right here, and now I have selected a different time frame, and it's going to load, and obviously it's going to take a little longer because it has more data to go through. But now we can see the progression since the start of the data. And you can do this for all time frames. And again, this is now for looking at the moving average for the last 50 days. So every data point here is saying what the average was of the last 50 days. So here it's saying that in the last 50 days at this date, so at the Valentine's Day, 14th of February, the 50 days before that, the average of P1 being put in at hour 0 is 18.37%. I don't think you can see the 18.37%, but that's what it's saying. So that's moving average. And you can do this for all the hours. Let me just close this up a little bit, because otherwise it's going to take a little bit to load. And here you can see hour 14, so you can see that little spurt that it had right here. We can go to hour 23. I think hour 23 had a massive decrease for a while and is now on its way back up. Yeah, so here we had this massive decrease and we just stayed low for a while, and now you can see that we had our way back up. So it's very interesting that there's also trends in this, but this is what I use, or this is what you can use to spot shorter term trend changes. So to recap, we have last P1 and last P2, which just shows how many days ago it was that the selected or each hour was put in. Then P1 changes is how much it has been changing, or how much it has been happening less or more in the last 50 days or whatever you have selected here. And then this chart shows you the progression of the moving average of P1 and P2 for the selected hour. That's it for this section. These are just the settings, 2 or 3 kind of features you can use to determine the shorter term swings and to also see how the trend is evolving, especially using this chart. So that's it for this video, and we'll see you in the next video where we're going to look at aggregated data.